when I eventually got sober, I retrained as a nurse. So I went back and became a mental health nurse, psychiatric nurse. And then I spent a lot of time working in the crisis mental health services. So working in male inpatient care, working with guys who were really acutely unwell. I always wanted to kind of use my experience to help people anyway, Wolf. And then after working there, I applied for a post in the addiction service, which for me was like, this is it. I have now landed. I have arrived. This is clearly where my purpose has got me, and this is going to be me now forever. And then that wasn't going to be the case, because then ARC and stuff was going to be birthed off that. But I think for me, it's really important. So I did the 12-step rooms. I've done person-centered recovery, Christian-based recovery. So I had experienced quite a lot of types of recovery programs. But for me, the biggest game changer was physical activity and exercise. And, you know, we've known about the benefits of exercise for a long time. There's about 40 odd years worth of research on the impacts and the positive benefits to people who are struggling. But for me, it was a game changer. And I remember I had this friend, Tim, and Tim came around to my flat 4 weeks after my last relapse, and he dragged me to a running club. And, you know, I'm dying to say, like, I got there like a gazelle and took to it like a duck to water, but definitely wasn't going to be the case. It was awful. It was awful. It was cold and it was wet and it was muddy and I was unfit. I didn't even look like a runner, and I puked after the session, and I was like, that's me. Never again. I'm retired. I'm done from running. But Tim, also a person in recovery, he knew a wee bit better, and he came round the following week, and with some gentle persuasion and a swift kick in the backside, found myself back at the running club then the following week. And you know what? Hey, I did the session and I didn't die, and it was just that little bit easier than it was the week before, but it was enough for me to want to go back again and again and again. And then eventually I was attending regular sessions, and for me, I think my identity started to shift from being somebody struggling with addiction to being somebody who focused on their health and who loved to run. And I was surrounded by people who kind of saw me through this different lens, and that was refreshing for me, because I had always been under the impression throughout my recovery that this long-term condition was going to follow me everywhere and be the defining thing about me, and it wasn't. And then, of course, through exercise, self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, all the things that addiction had stripped away over the years started to come back, and I loved it. So whenever...
Well, isn't that interesting? Because you talked about addiction stripping it away, but a little bit earlier in your story, of course, is you talking about the fact that you didn't have it in the first place, and addiction was the way of coping with it. So
yeah,
you know, you're going almost full circle to find an alternative way to
100%. And who would have thought that was like throwing on a pair of running shoes and just running and movement and starting to self-care better, you know, starting to look after all the things that I had neglected throughout the years. And I think for me it's important, because I think if I was to kind of whittle it down, like why the exercise part, and I think we sometimes go into treatment and we go into therapy and we're not foundationally ready. We're just out of chaos. We're tired. We're exhausted. We haven't been sleeping. We haven't been eating. So just like a house needs a foundation, I think recovery needs that foundation of, you know, physical, emotional and nutritional foundation before we can start unpacking all those years of trauma and pain. So that's where I suppose the idea came from ARC. So it was literally my experience of the benefit of exercise, my experience of people who saw me through a different lens and saw me as somebody with a problem and not a problematic person, which was really important because that was an identity shift. I had always advocated through my own social media accounts, and I suppose kind of talked about my own journey, about, you know, the reality of, you know, being somebody who's been through this, and always promoted that hope aspect. And I'd never really done anything with it. I had countless conversations about, you know, I would love to start something with exercise, and again, then life was busy, so it didn't happen. And I started to do indoor climbing, and it was my client, one of the guys was down there. He says, I saw your social media post about your recovery, and I have a friend who's struggling, but I couldn't share it. Have you ever thought of setting up a page? And I was like, well, not really. And then I was climbing, and as I was climbing, I went home and I created the page. So that one conversation was the driver to create ARC for what it was.
And I love that. Sorry, just serendipitous moments are just so important in these journeys. You know, I think people think that they can do the whole thing from the commissioner's office. and actually they can't. Some of it just happens, and it's the spark and the acorns. Go on, carry on. Yeah, so
And
please.
that was exactly what happened. Like my goal that month wasn't to set up an addiction recovery
No,
organization.
exactly, yes.
You know, I just wanted to climb and get some headspace.
Yeah.
And I went home, and the idea at the time was to create this signposting page to local organizations and even personal trainers who I knew were kind of reputable that would be able to support people if they wanted to do it. And within 2 weeks, people were trying to refer themselves to me, and I was like, "Whoa, right? Wasn't expecting that. Right? This is a little bit different now." And give it a little bit of thought, and then thought, well, do you know what? I'm trying to signpost people to personal trainers. I love fitness. I love what I'm talking about. Why don't I try it myself? So became a personal trainer really fast, as I tend to do things. And then I applied for 6 people who wanted to start a 6-week journey of sobriety through physical activity. I didn't have any premises. And I approached the local gym that I was at. It's a commercial gym, and they allowed me to use their space for free to deliver this very first kind of edition of the program. And I suppose from my nursing experience, it was really important that this wasn't just my opinion, that this is a good thing and it helps people. I needed to find a way to try and measure it somehow. So I thought, right, I connected with a lecturer of mine who taught me whenever I was studying, and we decided that, look, we're going to do this and we're going to kind of look at the outcomes. And we looked at the GAD and the PHQ for anxiety, depression, and stress. So we measured that, and then from King's College we got the SURE recovery evaluator and the SUS sleep.
Yeah, I do
scale.
work with Joe that develops the SURE. So
yeah, and
we've used it in a couple of projects, Andy and I. So yeah.
And we've used that from the start now. So that was all self-measurement before, during, and after. All the scores were positive, because as you do when you bring people together in a group and you start training people and connecting with people, then you start to see these improvements. And that's how it really started. I was still working, running this program. I had no funding. I had no money. I was doing it my days off, my evenings. And then
But I love that bit as well, because you've told me some of the things that are common I hear in recovery community journeys. We've got the serendipity of you and someone else having a conversation. The number of times I've heard this serendipity of 2 people having a conversation that then becomes something else. And then you've also talked about having a supporter. So the first instance, your supporter was someone that just gave you a bit of space. And these just feel like very normal.
Yeah.
Little and you're going to tell us in a minute how much you've grown, but but the little to the large, it's like
those things, those relationships were so important at the beginning, because again, and I think you touched on it, right? I didn't have this clear directional goal. I didn't know, like, what it looks like today is not what I ever thought it was going to look like. But those people they saw something in it.
Yeah.
They saw something in the heart and the desire. And for me, the heart was always about helping people, not about growing an organization. That came second.
Yeah.
And whenever people saw that, people buy into that. And also, this started at a really, really great time of need in my community. The drug landscape had been changing for a considerable period of time. The drug deaths were starting to increase, and people were just getting a little bit kind of fed up with having limited options. So what happened then was this new option appeared, and then that's where the growth came from extremely quickly, because it was different.